6 years after our divorce, I ran into my ex-wife on a street corner, holding my 3-year-old daughter in my arms. Saraphina stared blankly at the little girl in my arms, and after a long moment, she asked in disbelief, "Your child?" I nodded slowly under her intense gaze. The calm composure on Saraphina's face shattered, and she looked at me as if I were the one who had betrayed her, even though she was the one who had betrayed our marriage. She probably thought my love for her was so deep that I would wait for her forever, even after she cheated and left me. The day Saraphina laid everything on the table, she showed me an ultrasound. The gestational sac was over 8 weeks, and I had just returned from a business trip that had lasted more than 3 months. The child obviously wasn't mine. She sat on the sofa, her attitude cold and rigid, and informed me that she had started an affair 6 months ago. Now she was pregnant, wanted to keep the baby, and give her lover a proper place in her life, which meant she had to divorce me. For a moment, I thought I must have misheard, but before I could even ask, Saraphina, anticipating my question, looked me straight in the eye and said flatly, "You heard me right." Staring at the woman I had loved for 5 years, my heart felt like it was being pierced by 1,000 needles, a dense pain spreading through me until I could barely stand. I had never imagined there would be a problem with my marriage. Saraphina was beautiful, but she had a cold, reserved personality. In college, she was the famous ice queen, and plenty of guys liked her, but I was the only one persistent enough to pursue her for 2 years before she finally agreed to date me. I was truly, deeply in love with her. We were together for so many years that even though she never once said she loved me, she had come to take my presence for granted. We got married right after graduating from college. 3 years of dating, 2 years of marriage, and after only 5 years together, she was already tired of me. I couldn't accept it. I was so lost that I even tried to find an excuse for her infidelity. I wanted to say that I couldn't live without her, that I couldn't accept a divorce, but the words died on my lips as I looked at her cold, indifferent face. I asked myself, even if a cheating Saraphina agreed to come back and continue our life together, would I really want that? I wouldn't. The love I believed in was always one of unwavering fidelity, and that went double for marriage. After all our years together, Saraphina knew exactly how much I loved her. Probably afraid I would cause a scene, she made a quick phone call after demanding the divorce, grabbed her keys, and walked out without a backward glance. She didn't come back until the next morning. I'd spent the entire night on the balcony in the cold air, thinking, but I still couldn't figure out why Saraphina would cheat on me. Saraphina came from a much wealthier family than I did. As the only daughter, she started taking over their struggling family business after graduation. Because of that, she had been incredibly busy for the past couple of years, with almost no time to rest. Working all day and entertaining clients at night had become her new normal. I couldn't understand how someone that busy could possibly find the time to have an affair. When Saraphina returned, she stood in the entryway silently looking at me, or more accurately, at the carpet of cigarette butts at my feet. Her expression was unchanged. She couldn't feel an ounce of my despair. I stared at her from across the living room. Her polished, glamorous appearance was a stark contrast to my disheveled mess. After what felt like an eternity, I heard her, "Have you thought it through?" Thought it through. I thought back on our 5 years together. Whenever we argued, no matter who was at fault, I was always the first one to give in. She never backed down, not once. My one-sided devotion had clearly turned into self-degradation. I crushed out the cigarette on the floor, ignoring the pins and needles in my legs, and lifted my chin to ask her, "Why? Why did you cheat? We'd known each other for 7 years, been together for 5. Last night, I had imagined countless reasons she might want a divorce. I would have forgiven her for anything but cheating, and yet that's exactly what it was." Saraphina looked away, a hint of impatience in her eyes. "There is no why, Liam. Our time is up. Can't we just part ways amicably?" What a line. Our time is up. Part ways amicably. In that moment, something inside me died completely. Fine. I managed, forcing a grim smile. Let's get a divorce. Perhaps because I agreed so quickly, which didn't fit the image of the devoted man who always catered to her. Saraphina stared at me for a moment, stunned. Her lips parted as if to say something, but in the end, she said nothing at all. With my consent, the divorce process was remarkably smooth. We didn't even tell our parents. We rushed to get the divorce papers just as hastily, as we had rushed to get married. As the one at fault, Seraphina gave me a generous settlement, even signing over the house we had bought together after 2 years of marriage. It only took her half a day to pack all of her belongings. I watched her load her bags into the car and drive away, never once looking back. 5 years. I thought you'd get more attached to a dog in that amount of time. When Seraphina decided to be ruthless, she was truly cutthroat. It was because of this that I suddenly had the urge to see the man she cheated with, to see what was so special about him that he could make Seraphina do something she'd always claimed to despise. In the end, I resisted the urge. Since we were divorced, the best way to respect what we once had was to stay out of each other's lives. The day after the divorce, I got a Facebook message from Seraphina's cousin, Beatrice. She asked me who the guy was that went home with her cousin. The message was followed by 3 snickering emojis. I stared at the message for a long time before a sense of resignation washed over me. You should ask your cousin that question. After sending the reply, I unfriended Beatrice. Beatrice had never liked me. She sent that message just to twist the knife. I wasn't about to give her the satisfaction. The street was bustling with people, but standing there in the crowd, I felt like I couldn't find my way home. In that moment, I realized it was time for me to leave Chicago. The next day, I submitted my resignation. I had moved to the city for Seraphina, and now I was leaving because of her. Looking back, I had spent the better part of my youth revolving entirely around Seraphina. No wonder she got sick of me. After quitting my job, I spent a month at home, then sold the house and prepared to leave. 2 hours before my flight, as I was finishing my packing, Seraphina suddenly called. We'd been divorced for over a month and had made a clean break. There was no reason for us to be in contact, especially not for her to be the one calling me. I hesitated for a moment before answering. Hello. Seraphina's flat voice came through the phone. You sold the house? I was taken aback and instinctively retorted, Am I not allowed to? There was a long silence on the other end before Seraphina said coldly, Do whatever you want. Then she hung up. In the past, if she had used that tone with me, I would have immediately bought her favorite gift and stood outside her office begging for her forgiveness. How things had changed. Surely Seraphina didn't still think I would put up with her moods like I used to. Ridiculous. I stared blankly at my phone for a moment. Then, before heading to the airport, I walked into a carrier store and canceled my number. From now on, I wanted no contact with Seraphina whatsoever. I was born in a small town in rural Illinois, a place where life moved at a slower pace than in the big city. My grandmother, now in her 80s, grabbed my hand the moment she saw me. She looked me up and down, chiding me for not eating properly and for getting so thin. I slowed my pace, walking with her into the sunset as we headed home. Just like when I was a boy, it felt just like old times. Looking at her white hair and her back so stooped she could no longer stand up straight, a wave of sadness washed over me. For all those years I was chasing after Seraphina, how many times had my dear grandmother waited at the edge of town, watching the buses, hoping to see a familiar face step off? My grandmother raised me, so I was never particularly close to my parents. I didn't even tell them I was coming back after the divorce. On my 12th day back, our next-door neighbor came over with her phone for my grandmother. A complicated way she looked at me told me instantly that my parents were on the line. As my grandmother handed me the phone, I could already hear my mother's furious shouting. I hung up without a word. Less than a minute later, it rang again. I barely got a hello out before the shouting started again, even louder this time. I hung up again. After 4 or 5 rounds of this, my mother finally calmed down. She stopped screaming and just asked for my new number, demanding to know what I was thinking, keeping something as huge as a divorce from her. I pressed my lips together and told her quietly, I was just thinking that I've been divorced for almost 2 months. It took you less time to remember I exist. This time, there was a stunned silence on the other end. When I was a child, my family was very poor. After I was born, my parents decided to move away to find work, leaving me with my grandmother. A few years later, they had made some money, but they also had a new child, my younger brother. Their reason for having him was that I wasn't close to them. Later, they tried to have me stay with them during the summer to build a bond. I was 11 and my brother was 6. At that age, I was too old to fight over toys, but my brother, whom I'd met only a handful of times, was openly hostile. I remember picking up his action figures from the sofa and putting them neatly on a table. When my parents got home from work, Some of those same figures were suddenly missing arms and legs. My brother clutched the broken toys and started to cry, knowing full well our parents doted on him. Sure enough, my parents gave me a complicated look. I tried to explain that I hadn't done it. I still remember the feeling of helplessness from that moment. My mother just waved her hand dismissively. All right, I know you didn't do it, she said. Then, thinking I was out of earshot, she turned to my father and said, "How could your mother raise him to be like this?" My father said nothing, clearly agreeing with her. They bought him more toys after that, but they kept them locked in a closet, and only the three of them had a key. I have a seafood allergy. My grandmother always remembered, and there was never any seafood on her table. Before I went to stay with them, my grandmother specifically told my mother not to let me eat any seafood, and my mother agreed. But on the third day of my visit, I ended up in the emergency room after eating a bowl of seafood chowder. As I struggled to breathe, I could hear my parents arguing just outside the door. How was I supposed to know he was allergic to seafood? My mother said. My father's voice was weary. Mom told you when she dropped him off. She told me a million things. How could I remember all of them? My mother's voice grew shrill. Besides, he's old enough to know what he can and can't eat. He was probably just being greedy. His brother wanted some, and he didn't want to miss out. Now, their anger was likely because my divorce from Saraphina meant they could no longer get any financial benefits from my side to help support my brother. After all, Saraphina had money, and I didn't. Why else would they have even remembered to call me? The matter must have been serious because my parents drove down that very evening. My college-age brother trailed behind them. When our eyes met, he didn't even have time to hide the gloating look on his face. I hadn't seen them in over 2 years, and they looked much older. The wrinkles around their eyes were deep, their laugh lines more pronounced. My mother's face in particular had taken on a harsh, severe look. My mother ignored my grandmother's cheerful greeting and shot me a cold glare. Before she even sat down, she snapped, "Liam, you think you're all grown up now, don't you? Making a huge decision like getting a divorce without even talking to us." My grandmother, shocked by the news, looked from my mother to me, her lips trembling, but she didn't say a word. Knowing how shallow our bond was, I felt nothing. I just stared at the cigarette burning between my fingers and said nothing. My silence was the one thing my mother couldn't stand. Her voice became shrill. "Liam, is this how you treat your own mother? You have no respect at all. No wonder your marriage failed. You." Seeing she was going too far, my father finally pulled at her arm. "You're letting your anger get the best of you," he said, clearly displeased. "How can you say that to him?" My mother knew she'd crossed a line, but she was too proud to apologize. She just snorted and turned away. My father then looked at me with an awkward expression, as if expecting me to be the one to apologize. Unbelievable. I was the one being yelled at, and I was supposed to apologize. Why are children born indebted to their parents? My grandmother brought them some tea and said quietly, "You should talk things through with him properly." My mother shot her a look of disdain. "What do you know? He's only this defiant because you spoiled him rotten." She always used my grandmother as a scapegoat, and for the sake of peace, my grandmother always took it in silence. I dropped my cigarette and ground it out with my shoe. Then I turned to my father. "How did you know I was divorced?" My father gave an awkward laugh. "Saraphina called us. She said she hadn't been able to reach you and was getting worried." I pressed my lips together, a bitter laugh rising in my throat. She was the one who cheated. She was the one pregnant with another man's child. She was the one who asked for the divorce. She was the one who said our time was up and we should have a clean break. I didn't fight it. Since we were divorced, I was determined to cut all ties. So what was she doing contacting my parents? My mother was still rambling on about how wonderful Saraphina was, and with every compliment for Saraphina, she'd throw an unpointed jab about how difficult my personality was and how lucky I was that Saraphina had put up with me for so long. I listened without expression as she belittled me by comparing me to Saraphina, dredging up all my past faults, until she finally came to the conclusion that there was something wrong with me. She was right. If I were normal, I wouldn't have sat there and listened to her nonsense for so long. I suppose a part of me still clung to some impossible hope. No matter what my mother said, the divorce was final. There was no going back. That night I spent in the cold without a single word of comfort from her was a wake-up call. Life was too long to waste on someone who didn't love me. In the end, my mother was still not satisfied. She argued that Saraphina's family business was on the rise with huge potential, and that I couldn't just throw that away by divorcing her. Even with a divorce, I should have fought for at least 10% of the company's stock. I pressed my throbbing temples and cut them off. Are you done? My parents both turned to stare at me. Even my brother, who had been enjoying the spectacle, looked up in surprise. I had always been mild-mannered. I had never once talked back to or defied my parents, which was precisely why my mother felt she could belittle me without consequence. But today, I was done being patient. I didn't beat around the bush. If you've said your piece, you should leave, I said calmly. While you can still catch a bus back. My mother's eyes widened. After a moment of shock, she pointed a finger at my face and started screaming again, calling me an ungrateful brat, calling me cold-hearted. I gave her a single glance, stood up, and walked out of the house. Cold-heartedness, it seems, is hereditary. I inherited my cold heart from them. I have no one else to blame. I found a motel in town to stay in. Just as I got settled, my phone rang. It was Saraphina. I have no idea how she got my new number. I stared at the number I still knew by heart, hesitated, and let it ring. She wasn't discouraged, calling a second, then a third time. Her patience with me seemed to have improved dramatically since our divorce. When she called for the 7th time, I finally picked up. The line was silent except for the sound of her steady breathing. I didn't speak either, just watched the call timer tick past the 2-minute mark. Then I broke the silence. Our time is up. Let's part ways amicably. Those were your... I don't make a habit of staying in touch with my ex-wife, Saraphina. Whatever it is, don't call me again. She remained silent. I didn't wait for a response. I hung up and blocked her number. She was never this persistent in contacting me when we were married. Now that we were divorced, she suddenly couldn't leave me alone. What was it? Was she not used to suddenly being without the man who doted on her every move? It was possible. After all, I had catered to her every need for 5 years. I knew my parents. Having escaped poverty, they were terrified of ever going back, which is a large part of why we were never close. They wouldn't stay more than a week. The only way for me to avoid them was to not go back to my grandmother's house. I turned off my phone and stayed in that motel for a week. On the evening of the 7th day, my grandmother found me, leaning on her worn-out cane. The 80-year-old woman had walked all the way from her house to town asking for me. I could just picture her making her way here step by step, asking people for directions. Her white hair glowed orange in the setting sun. She smiled at me, her mouth mostly toothless, and said, "Liam, they're gone. Grandma's here to take you home." I suddenly remembered how, when I was a boy, she would wait for me at the edge of town after my late-night study sessions, no matter how late it was. I thought I was long past the age of crying, but looking at my grandmother, so stooped with age that she was now almost 2 heads shorter than me, I couldn't stop my eyes from welling up. I didn't turn my phone back on until I was back at my grandmother's house. Unsurprisingly, there were long, rambling messages from both of my parents on Facebook, all of them berating me for my thoughtlessness. I didn't bother reading them. Saraphina had also texted from an unknown number. The gist was that she hoped I was living well and that she was just checking to make sure I was safe, since we were, after all, married once. She said she wouldn't contact me again and that we should both just move on. Move on. Honestly, I didn't wish well for the person who betrayed our marriage. I couldn't bring myself to wish her happiness. The 7-figure balance in my bank account, however, gave me the freedom to do whatever I wanted. I wanted to see vast landscapes, mountains and lakes, sunrises and sunsets. In my 2nd year of traveling with my grandmother, I ran into an old acquaintance from my college days, a woman named Luna. I vaguely remembered her. She had been a top student, but very quiet and reserved. We hadn't interacted much, but I remembered who she was. We ended up at the same university, so we'd seen each other a few times, but we were never more than nodding acquaintances. She was traveling alone with just a camera and a simple backpack. It was nice to see a familiar face in an unfamiliar place, and since we were heading to the same next destination, we decided to travel together. Luna wasn't very talkative, but she was respectful, observant, and had a knack for making my grandmother laugh. Grandma took a real liking to her. One night, as my grandmother and I were sitting on lounge chairs looking up at the stars, she suddenly said, "That Luna is a good kid." I knew instantly what she was getting at and gave a dry laugh. Yeah, she's great. When it came to matters of the heart, older people were always extra perceptive. But Luna and I, we got along well. but there was a gap between us that felt impossible to cross. I admired her, but that didn't mean I was romantically interested in her. Besides, I was divorced. I was in no position to be with someone like her. Being elderly, my grandmother needed a couple of days to rest and acclimatize every time we arrived in a new place. Because of this, I worried we were slowing Luna down and kept suggesting she go on ahead of us. Luna never took me up on the offer, just smiling and saying, "We can part ways at the next stop. I'd like to stay here a few more days anyway." We were in Arcadia, and the historic district in the misty rain was as beautiful as a painting. Surrounded by such beauty, my mood lifted, and I found myself stealing glances at Luna. Unlike Saraphina's flashy beauty, Luna had a delicate, gentle attractiveness. Her features were soft, and she had a quiet, intellectual air about her that made her seem approachable and kind. She noticed me looking and gave me a gentle smile. The reflection of the distant landscape in her dark eyes gave her an air of profound serenity. The cobblestone paths wound through the old town, and the light drizzle created a thin layer of mist, making the whole place feel magical. I told my grandmother I was going out for a walk. She said she was too old and didn't feel like walking far. She found a spot on a covered porch with some other local women her age, and they chatted away in their thick southern accents, laughing together whether they understood each other or not. I stood watching them for a moment, and then I heard footsteps approaching from behind. I turned to see Luna walking towards me through the mist, holding a beautiful, elegant umbrella. She stopped beside me, her movements graceful and fluid, with a gentleness I had never seen in anyone before. Luna asked if I wanted to walk with her. It was exactly what I wanted. I took the umbrella from her and tilted it to cover her. She was nearly a head shorter than me, but she had no trouble keeping pace. We walked together through the historic streets. Luna was a woman of few words, so I initiated most of the conversation. She listened intently and answered my questions carefully, as if she were trying to find the single correct answer for each one. It was charming. Looking at her delicate profile, I felt a pang of regret. I couldn't quite place it. It was a shame. I felt like I was long past the age of falling in love. Luna and I parted ways at our next stop. After that, I crossed mountains and lakes with my grandmother, but I never saw her again. My grandmother and I had left in early winter and returned in late summer. My grandmother was smiling much more. She'd go out with her cane to chat with the neighbors, telling anyone who would listen about the vast and beautiful country she had seen. Even though her descriptions were simple, the other elderly folks in town listened with expressions of longing and envy. But some people couldn't stand to see her happy, and they would always pointedly ask me about my marriage or my job. The smile would freeze on my grandmother's face, and after a long pause, she would just sigh. "The affairs of the young are not for us to meddle in," she'd say, waving a dismissive hand. The person who brought it up would give a knowing look, and the topic would finally be dropped. After a few days of rest at home, I started to form a new plan for my life. I had majored in civil engineering in college, but I'd audited more than a few horticulture classes. In a small town like this, land was plentiful. I leased a few acres and decided to try growing and selling flowers. With people making a bigger deal of holidays these days, the market for flowers was strong. Besides, I wanted to settle down and find some peace. I couldn't think of a better way than tending to a garden. In the following months, Beatrice contacted me a few more times using a friend's Facebook account, trying to probe whether I was truly over her cousin. I had loved Saraphina so deeply that my clean break must have looked like a strategic retreat to them, a way to make her want me back. I had wasted so much time and energy on her. The cost of leaving was all those years of my youth. It was a high price to pay. At the time, I was busy building greenhouses on my leased land. I had no time or desire to deal with her, so eventually she gave up. I wasn't that foolish. At least I knew when to cut my losses. Just as I was finishing the greenhouses, an old acquaintance showed up at my door. It was Luna. She was sitting in the yard, talking with my grandmother, her slender silhouette bathed in the gentle, beautiful light of the setting sun. As if sensing my presence, she turned and smiled at me. "I was passing through the area," she said, "and thought I'd stop by to see you." My heart, which had felt dormant for so long, suddenly skipped a beat before settling back into its normal rhythm. Luna, who had said she was just stopping by, settled in and never mentioned leaving. Every morning, she would come out with me, following me with her camera as I worked. Sometimes I'd get far ahead while she was still taking a picture, and I would stop and wait for her to catch up. I knew she loved the scenery here, loved it enough to pause her travels. When we reached the flower fields, she would show me the photos she had taken, the morning mist, the smoke from chimneys, the patchwork of fields, and the few houses nestled in the green hills. The landscape of a small town has its own unique charm. Snapping out of my reverie, I realized how close we were standing. Our eyes met for a second, and we both quickly looked away. I saw a faint blush on Luna's cheeks. I was slow on the uptake, but I finally realized something was happening. So, on the day the first seed sprouted, I invited Luna to have a drink with me in the small cabin by the fields. As the wine took effect, I told her everything about my past with Saraphina. Luna paused for a moment. She was smart. She had to have understood what I was trying to say. After a moment, she let out a soft sigh. In the dim light of the lamp, she looked at me intently. "You don't have to tell me," she said. "I already know." But she wouldn't say how. After the intense love I'd had for Seraphina faded, I didn't know if I was even capable of loving someone else. But I knew that even if I was, now wasn't the time. Then again, maybe I was just overthinking things. Maybe Luna didn't feel that way at all. The flowers we planted in late summer sprouted in the fall and formed tiny buds in the dead of winter. Luna's camera documented their entire life cycle. She had transformed from a travel blogger into a gardening blogger, and she seemed to be enjoying every minute of it. Habit is a powerful thing. I had to admit that in just a few short months, I had grown accustomed to having Luna around. Her presence was like a gentle spring rain, nurturing things quietly and without notice. Before I knew it, the new year had arrived. On the first day of spring, the roses in the greenhouse bloomed. They were a vibrant, dewy red, and their fragrance was rich and lasting. I picked one and held it in my palm, admiring it. Luna, who had just been photographing the roses, came over and leaned in to look at the one in my hand. She was so close I could smell the clean, fresh scent of her soap. Compared to her, even the vibrant rose seemed to pale. In that moment, on some impulse, I held the rose out to her. "Luna, do you like roses? Do you like roses, and do you like the man giving them to you?" Luna froze, her eyes dropping to the rose and then rising to meet mine. Her dark, almond-shaped eyes seemed to hold a universe of unspoken emotion. After a long moment, she took the rose from my hand, brought it to her nose, and inhaled its scent. Then she smiled slowly and said, "I do." "Like what? The rose, or maybe, just maybe me?" I just stared at her, forgetting to ask, knowing only that in that moment, the entire sea of flowers around us couldn't compare to the gentle beauty in her eyes. And just like that, I heard the walls I had built around my heart come crashing down. It wasn't that I was incapable of love. Once I was sure of my feelings, I formally asked Luna to be with me at the end of March. She didn't seem surprised at all, and she accepted without a moment's hesitation. Our dynamic didn't change much after we got together. After 6 months, she was still the same gentle person I first met. My grandmother was overjoyed, and I think she doted on Luna even more than she doted on me. By April, my flower business had taken off, with both online and local sales booming. I never had a problem with unsold stock again. My parents called when they heard I was a flower farmer. My mother's voice was as shrill as ever, telling me I was a good-for-nothing who was destined to rot in the dirt. I'll never understand why my own parents held so much malice for me, but I decided then and there to stop letting it affect me. I said calmly, "Since you despise me so much, just pretend you never had me." Her shrill tirade stopped abruptly. My father quickly took the phone and chided me for being so immature at my age. I laughed. "Well, you still have one obedient, sensible son. Having me around was clearly one too many." My father sighed, told me to calm down, and hung up. I took a deep breath of the fragrant air. When I turned, I saw Luna running towards me with a bouquet of baby's breath. She handed it to me, rubbing her nose nervously as she asked if I liked it. Luna was so perceptive. Even though I was calm, she could sense my unhappiness. I looked down at the flowers, suddenly remembering their meaning: everlasting love and protection. I remembered how, whenever I had conflicts with my parents in the past, Seraphina would just frown at me or even blame me for being stubborn and difficult. I leaned in and hugged her. I felt her stiffen for a second, then her arms wrapped tightly around my waist. We were so close I could hear her heart beating faster and faster. I suddenly found myself craving this warmth. In our 5th year together, Luna and Liam's daughter Annie turned 3. She would be starting preschool in the fall. We had to go back to Chicago to sort out some paperwork for her. It had been 6 years since my divorce from Saraphina. In all that time, I hadn't heard a thing about her, and I hadn't once been back to Chicago. But business was business. As soon as we got to Chicago, Luna and I went to the county clerk's office. She went inside to handle Annie's paperwork, and since it was going to be a long wait, I took Annie for a walk down the street. Being in an unfamiliar place, Annie was looking around at everything with wide-eyed curiosity. Soon, she refused to walk any further, holding up her arms to be carried. Luna spoiled her a little, so she was prone to tears the moment things didn't go her way. I picked her up and carried her around the block, and that's when, on a street corner, I saw a familiar figure. It was Saraphina. After 6 years, my first instinct was to turn and walk away, but in the next second, she looked up. Her eyes swept past me, then snapped back. Our eyes met across the street. I held my daughter a little tighter and turned my face away, my expression blank. The most familiar of strangers. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw her hesitate for a moment, then start walking purposefully towards me. I wanted nothing to do with her, so I turned to leave. "Liam," she called out from behind me. I frowned but stopped walking. She walked up to me, her eyes flicking from my face to the little girl in my arms. After a long moment, she asked in a tone of disbelief, "Your child?" I nodded under her intense gaze. I even managed a small smile. "Yes, my daughter," I said softly. "She just turned 3. The calm composure on Saraphina's face crumbled. She looked at me again, and this time it was with the look of someone who had been betrayed. Incredible. I knew Saraphina too well. Even after 6 years, I could guess what that look meant. She was the one who had betrayed our marriage. Could she really believe that I loved her so much that I would just wait for her to come back, even after she cheated on me and left? As if sensing the tension, Annie's little arms tightened around my neck. She buried her face in my shoulder and mumbled, "Daddy." I patted her back gently to soothe her, then looked back at Saraphina. 6 years hadn't changed her much. She was still tall, slender, and strikingly beautiful. The only difference was a newfound maturity. The ice queen of our college days had been replaced by a woman with a sophisticated, worldly beauty. It was a beauty that came from within, a product of time and experience. Seeing each other again, there were no polite, long-time no-sees, nor was there any animosity. Whatever love or resentment I once felt for her had long since faded away over the past 6 years. Saraphina glanced up at me, then her eyes fell back to my daughter. Her expression was complicated, her gaze lowered, making her thoughts impossible to read. After so many years apart, we had both started new families. Looking at the woman I was once so intimate with, I felt nothing. After a moment of silence, Saraphina took a small step forward. "You." She was cut off by a gentle voice calling, "Annie." At the sound of the voice, Annie's head shot up. "Mommy," she yelled, spotting Luna at the end of the street and reaching her little arms out towards her. Luna's gaze rested on Saraphina for a brief moment before she walked over to me. As she passed Saraphina, she gave her a brief, polite nod, then took Annie from my arms. Annie snuggled obediently against her shoulder, murmuring "Mommy," as Luna stroked her head with a doting smile. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the look of utter shock on Saraphina's face. I guess she must have recognized Luna for some reason. A wave of satisfaction washed over me. I took Luna's hand and said to Saraphina, "This is my wife." Saraphina's gaze dropped to our intertwined hands, and her eyes darkened. Luna cooed at Annie for a moment, then looked at me. She gave our joined hands a gentle squeeze and asked softly, "Ready to go?" I nodded, taking Annie back from her and settling her in my arms. We had only taken a few steps when we ran into another familiar face, Darius. I remembered him from college. He was a brilliant student and Saraphina's biggest academic rival. What I remembered most was that their constant competition had led to a mutual dislike. In college, they never seemed to interact outside of academic competitions. If they passed each other on campus, they would pointedly look away in mutual disdain. Darius was clearly startled to see me. He pressed his lips together awkwardly and avoided my gaze, looking off to his right. He was holding the hand of a little boy, about 6 or 7 years old. When the boy saw Saraphina, he pulled his hand free and ran towards her, shouting, "Mommy." So that's who it was. In that instant, everything clicked into place. I glanced back at Saraphina. She bit her lip and turned away, unable to meet my gaze. Luna squeezed my hand a little tighter. I turned back to her and gave her a reassuring smile, and we continued on our way. As we passed Darius, I heard him speak. "Liam, congratulations." I paused for a second, then let out a cold laugh. "I should be thanking you for making it all possible. The man who broke up my marriage. What right did he have to offer me false congratulations? Those who leave you are part of a yesterday you can't hold on to." After we returned from Chicago, our life as a family of three settled back into its peaceful, fulfilling, and sweet routine. By unspoken agreement, neither Luna nor I mentioned Saraphina. About 2 weeks later, I was pruning flowers when I looked up and saw Luna holding Annie, staring out the window with a grim expression. Luna was always so gentle. In all the years I'd known her, I had never seen her look like that. I followed her gaze and saw a familiar figure standing outside our house. It was Saraphina. She was in the yard talking to my grandmother, but her eyes kept darting towards the house. No wonder Luna looked so grim. But what on earth was Saraphina doing here? After calming Annie down, Luna glanced at me. "Stay inside," she said before heading out the door herself. I watched through the window as she and Saraphina talked. The two women, around the same age, had completely different auras, each beautiful in her own way. My eyes went past Saraphina and settled on Luna, and I found I couldn't look away. In my mind, Luna was always gentle and sweet. This confrontational, hostile version of her was someone I had never seen before. I watched her for a while longer, a smile forming on my lips without me even realizing it. When Luna came back inside, I hadn't yet wiped the smile off my face. She paused, her bright eyes darkening slightly. "You seem happy about this," she said, her tone unreadable. I realized she had misunderstood and explained. "I am. I've just never seen you be so hostile to anyone before." Her expression softened. She picked up Annie, who was playing with blocks, and leaned against my shoulder with our daughter between us. "You should go out and talk to her," she said, her voice tinged with resignation. "Make things clear." After a pause, she added quietly, "And don't be a fool." I stood under the grape arbor in the yard, face to face with Saraphina. In just 2 weeks, she looked haggard. Her clothes were wrinkled, as if she had traveled in a hurry. This wasn't the polished, put-together Saraphina I remembered. She just stood there looking at me in silence. The air was thick with unspoken words. My grandmother, probably unable to stand the tension, got up with her cane and said the yard felt stuffy and she was going for a walk. Once she was out of earshot, I broke the silence. "Saraphina," I said, "it's been many years, but there's one question I've always wanted to ask you." A flicker of hope seemed to ignite in her lifeless eyes. I guess she thought I was going to ask if she had ever loved me. How shallow. Saraphina cleared her throat, her voice still hoarse when she spoke. "Ask." I saw the slender figure in the window smile slightly. I took a step closer and lowered my voice. "Was it worth it?" Saraphina froze, the color draining from her face. Her perfect makeup couldn't hide the look of pure shock and bewilderment. A profound sense of satisfaction washed over me. I saw her knuckles turn white as she gripped the trellis. "I'm sorry," she finally managed. An apology 6 years too late, I thought. She couldn't bring herself to finish the sentence. Thought what? That I loved her so much that even after she left me, I'd be somewhere out there silently watching over her? But Saraphina, no one is born indebted to anyone else. We're in our 30s now. How do you still not understand that? I said nothing, just looked at her coldly. We were supposed to go our separate ways and find our own happiness. For whatever reason she had, it was wrong for her to come here. But here she was, 6 years after our divorce, showing up at my door. Saraphina met my gaze, her eyes bloodshot. "Finally," she said, "Liam, you probably won't believe me, but I truly regret divorcing you." I was taken aback for a moment. Then I slowly started to smile. So what? I knew her better than anyone. She didn't truly regret it. She just saw that I was doing fine without her, that I was even happier than when I was with her. And that made her uncomfortable. In other words, even if she did truly regret it, what difference would it make? What right did she have to hurt me, disappear for years, and then show up telling me she was sorry? Don't talk to me about second chances. I have no respect for people who only want to come back after they've thrown everything away. The only reason she could say something like that to me after 6 years was because she was still banking on the unconditional love I once had for her. I had loved her with everything I had, and she couldn't believe that I could have let her go so easily. So when she finally realized what she had lost, it was inevitable that she couldn't accept it. Perhaps the years of farming and gardening had mellowed me. I was more at peace than she was, and I had no desire to prolong the conversation. I just urged her to leave. She had a new family now. Coming here to find me was a betrayal to them. She had betrayed me once. Was she going to do it to her new family as well? Saraphina left my house, but she didn't leave the town. She checked into a local motel, and every morning, I would see her standing in the distance, watching my house. Luna's expression grew darker with each passing day, though she tried to hide it from me and Annie. Finally, one night, after she thought I was asleep, Luna quietly got dressed and slipped out of the house. As soon as she was gone, I got up and followed her. Sure enough, she was meeting with Saraphina. I crouched under the window of the motel room and listened. After a long silence, Saraphina spoke first. Before I came here, Darius told me everything. My reunion with him. That was your doing, wasn't it? My heart leaped, but I quickly composed myself. So that was what had finally broken her. Luna said nothing. Then I heard Saraphina say through gritted teeth, "You're very clever." There was another long silence. I quietly stood up and peered through a crack in the blinds. So what? Luna was standing in the shadows, so I couldn't see her face, but her voice was devoid of emotion. "You were the one who was despicable first, weren't you?" Seraphina's body went rigid. "You knew?" "Of course, I knew," Luna said with a cold laugh, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "I've loved Liam since I was 18. I loved him more at 28, and now, at 32, I love him more than ever. You, on the other hand, you have a restless streak in you. If it hadn't been Darius, it would have been someone else. Liam was miserable with you. He saved me once, a long time ago. It was only right that I return the favor. And what if Liam finds out?" There was a hint of desperate hope in Seraphina's voice. "If he finds out you manipulated his marriage, do you really think he won't hold it against you?" For a moment, Luna stepped out of the shadows, her expression unreadable. I heard her say, "I was saving him. How can you call that a plot?" The next day, when I saw Saraphina again, I walked over to her. Before she could speak, I cut right to the chase. "I heard everything you two said last night." A spark of hope ignited in Seraphina's eyes. She licked her dry lips. "Liam, there was nothing between me and Darius before. It was all." I cut her off coldly. "Our marriage was never happy. You never cared about me. Your parents, your cousin, they all thought I was marrying above my station. They never accepted me, and you never once stood up for me. It's been 6 years. We both have new families. For you to come all this way to find me, is that fair to?" I trailed off and gave a cold laugh. "Seraphina, for the sake of what we once were, let's just leave it at that." The last glimmer of hope in Seraphina's eyes died out. "Our time is up. Let's part ways amicably." I threw her own words back at her. In the distance, Luna was holding Annie, waving to me in the morning light. A smile spread across my face as I walked past Seraphina and towards them. With our daughter between us, Luna and I looked at each other and smiled. We each took one of Annie's hands and walked slowly into the flower fields. The sun was shining and life was good. An unhappy marriage isn't an ending. It's the start of a journey to your next happiness. In life, you'll always face hardships. You just have to stay true to yourself. Someone will be willing to walk through fire to find you. Seraphina's story, the bright sunlight streaming through the window, hurt my eyes. I opened them groggily, my head splitting from a sudden cold. The phone on the pillow beside me was ringing incessantly. The name Darius flashed on the screen again and again. A wave of irritation washed over me, and I threw the phone against the wall. It shattered. The world went quiet. I pinched the bridge of my nose. My head was pounding, but Liam's words from yesterday echoed in my mind. Every single one of them a clear rejection. They were my own words, but hearing them from him, I finally understood how much they could hurt. 6 years divorced, we both had new families. We shouldn't be bothering each other. But I couldn't help myself. I remembered how good he had been to me, so good that I once thought I couldn't live without him. The turning point in our relationship was his first long business trip. It was during that time that I ran into Darius, my first love from my youth. It was hard to believe that so many years after graduation, that ghost from my past would walk right back into my life. I found it impossible to resist, even though I knew I was betraying Liam. In the end, I was the one who betrayed our marriage. My mother was right. I had it too good and got bored. After the divorce, I sometimes thought about finding him, but I never acted on it. No one knew better than me how much Liam loved me. He adored me. The one who is loved always feels invincible. I was the one who made the mistake, but I still felt I held all the cards, until I saw him again 6 years later, with Luna Miller standing by his side. Or should I say Luna Lynch? No one knew my shameful secret, that the only reason I coincidentally appeared in Liam's life was because I knew that Luna had feelings for him. Luna had good taste. Liam was a wonderful partner. I just couldn't understand one thing. How could someone as proud as Luna marry a divorced man? The year I first met her, she was still Luna Lynch, using her father's last name. Luna was a good student, gentle and polite. She was only a year older than me, but she was the perfect child all the parents in our neighborhood, including my own, compared their kids to. At first, my impression of her was just that of a nice older girl from the neighborhood. I didn't adore her like some of the other kids, but I didn't dislike her either. That changed the day my father looked at me, covered in dirt after a day of playing outside. If only you could be as well-behaved as Luna. It was the first time I had ever heard my stern, serious father praise anyone, and it wasn't me. A seed of jealousy was planted without me even realizing it. It grew every time my mother praised Luna's grades to her mother, and every time my own cousin Beatrice told Luna, "You're so much nicer than my cousin, Saraphina." I started to subtly watch her every move. Her life was simple: studying, gardening, and her cat. She liked to read under a tree in her garden, her torso in the shade and her legs in the sun, with a fat orange cat sleeping lazily in her lap. Sunshine, flowers, a girl, a cat, the shade of a tree. It was a perfect picture. No wonder all the adults loved such a quiet, well-behaved girl. I reined in my wilder side and began, consciously or not, to imitate her, her temperament, her style of dress. Even I knew I was a fraud. I hated myself for it, but I couldn't stop because even my parents started to praise the change in me. Until the year I turned 16 and Luna turned 17. On the way home from school one day, some bullies cornered Luna in an alley. They were tormenting her. It was the first time something like that had happened to her, and she was so panicked her cries for help were barely a squeak. School had just let out, and plenty of students walked past the alley, but no one stopped to help. I stopped, but I was too scared to intervene until a tall boy stopped at the mouth of the alley. He glanced inside, saw what was happening, and without a word, grabbed a piece of wood from a pile of trash and charged in. He was outnumbered and took a beating, but he managed to rescue Luna. From the entrance of the alley, I heard his voice, strained with pain but full of menace. "If I ever see you bullying her again, I'll kill you." The boy and Luna helped each other out of the alley. I hid behind a tree in that moment, ashamed of my cowardice. I felt I could never face Luna again. Later, in Luna's art studio, I saw a sketch of the boy. It was a drawing of his back, and in the corner, his name was written, Liam. Maybe I understood her better than she understood herself, because just from that one drawing, I knew she had a crush on him. A teenage girl and her hero. The boy who had saved her that night was without a doubt a hero in her eyes. But Luna didn't try to get close to Liam. She would just occasionally hand him a bottle of water when he was drenched in sweat after a basketball game. Liam would take the water with a smile and a thank you. He was 16 or 17, handsome, with clear, honest eyes, but he looked at Luna like she was a stranger. He didn't recognize her as the girl he had saved that night. It made sense. Luna was always so proud. Of course, she wouldn't want the boy she liked to see her at her most vulnerable. After Liam walked away, Luna watched his back for a moment. Her eyes blinked twice quickly, and the corners of her mouth turned up in a slight smile. I knew that look. It was the look of someone in love. In all the years I'd known her, it was the first time I had ever seen her show interest in a boy. What if I took the boy Luna liked? The despicable thought took root in my mind and grew unstoppable. Getting together with Liam was easier than I could have imagined. More than once, I saw the look of disappointment in Luna's eyes. But Luna was Luna. She was too proud to ever try to steal someone else's boyfriend, and that only strengthened my resolve to stay with him. Finally, the year Luna turned 18, Her father's illegitimate son showed up on their doorstep. Luna's mother was a strong-willed woman and couldn't bear the humiliation, but she was too well-bred to cause a public scene. Her mother took Luna and left the Lynch family. She changed her last name to Miller. Finally, I was out of her shadow. For some reason, I didn't break up with Liam. He was a good person with a great personality, much more interesting than I had expected. In my 17 years, he was the first boy I'd ever really known. I could no longer tell if my feelings for him were real or if they were just born out of that initial spiteful competition. It felt like the natural next step. We got married right after graduation. In the beginning, I truly intended to spend the rest of my life with Liam. I don't want to think about what changed. In the end, I was the one who wronged him. After a divorce, people are supposed to move on. So why did I chase him all the way here? Maybe it was just as Liam said. Even after the divorce, I couldn't stand the thought of him being with another woman, especially not Luna, the one person I had always been trying to beat. The day before I was planning to leave, Darius and my cousin Beatrice showed up together. They couldn't find me, so they went to find Liam instead. My cousin was used to being arrogant with Liam. When I got there, she was in the middle of insulting him, calling him trash and shamelessly accusing him of interfering in my life after the divorce. Liam's expression didn't change. He gave my cousin and Darius a cool glance and said sarcastically, "Did you two slip your leashes? What are you doing barking on someone else's doorstep?" Beatrice's face turned livid. Before she could retort, Liam laughed. He looked at Darius. "So, you're the other man from all those years ago. How have you been enjoying your promotion from affair to official relationship?" Darius's face was a mask of fury. It was only then that Liam seemed to notice me standing behind them. He sighed, as if realizing it was pointless to argue with them. He looked at Darius. "What goes around comes around. Believe it or not, Darius, whatever pain I went through, you'll experience it tenfold someday." Darius's back was to me, so I couldn't see his face, but I could see the veins bulging on the back of his hands. He had wronged Liam first. He had no grounds to argue, no matter what Liam said. Finally, Liam waved a dismissive hand. "Saraphina, take them and get out of here. I don't want to see any of you ever again." With that, he took Luna's hand, and they disappeared into the sea of flowers. I watched them walk away, an unbearable ache in my heart. Darius walked towards me, his face dark. He clearly wanted to take out the anger he couldn't direct at Liam on me. "What? Are you enjoying yourself so much you've forgotten to leave?" I glanced at him, remembering his calculated reappearance in my life during my marriage to M.Y. despicable plan to steal him. Darius must have confessed it all to Luna. A wave of disgust washed over me, and I turned and walked away. All for the sake of a petty rivalry. I lost the boy who had been with me through my entire youth. In the end, I had lost to Luna after all, and with that, I had forever lost the one person who had loved me most.